Okay, well, hi everyone, and thank you very much for watching or listening today. Today I have a very special guest who's got pretty much one of the most incredible stories I've ever heard, even out of the amount of guests we've had on this show so far. Today's guest, Terry Ellis, some of you may have heard the story, some of you may not have heard the story. He's probably best known for being the mastermind behind the Verizon robbery in 2007. Not a cash robbery, a hardware robbery, as many will know, 5 million with 100 million worth of data. But he's now doing some really good work giving back after leaving a life of crime behind. Because today's story is not just a crime story, it's much more than that. It carries a very important social message about how Terry has turned his life around after serving nearly 2 decades in prison, which is something you don't hear every day. He came through that. He's also a very successful author now as well, author of Living Amongst the Beasts, The Rise and Fall of the Brendan Experiment, a great book. All of these books are available on Amazon as well. Also the author of Verizon, which is a book about the robbery itself. Resettlement Diaries, which is a book about his final year in prison and coming out after all that time. And HMP Help Me Prepare, which is, I think, a very powerful book because that really helps people who are going to be serving their first sentences and don't know what to expect. Just to give a shout out, two of these books were written with Chris Alston as well, to give him a mention. They're all available on Amazon and on the usual bookstores. So today we're going to be having a chat about Terry's life from basically carrying out one of Britain's biggest and most daring robberies in British history, really, as well as a previous life of crime before that, to how he's turned it around to what he's doing today, owning a nutritious food company, as well as being involved in an anti-knife crime campaign, and everything else that he's doing to really change people's perceptions of crime. So, Terry, that's enough of me talking about you in third person there, mate. I just want to say, obviously, a big thank you for coming on the show, and I appreciate you making the time to sort of do this talk with us. Thank you, mate.
Liv, it's a pleasure to be here, and it's a pleasure to share my story.
Incredible. So, like I said to you at the beginning, a lot of these interviews, they sort of start in the background and work forward in a linear way. But I don't want to do that. I'm going to actually start with the present day. Obviously, right now we're just at the beginning of 2022, and you're doing some fantastic work, obviously with your food company, which we were just talking about just now. Also with the anti-knife crime campaign, obviously with your books as well and everything. So I think we actually start there because I love some of the work you're doing. Can you walk us through, what your life is like right now in 2022, and some of the projects that you've got going on, like I say, with the food, with the anti-knife crime and so forth, please?
Yeah, I've been out of prison 5 years, and it's been a roller coaster. But it's been a roller coaster where I've gone from strength to strength to strength. I left prison. I had a blue tent. I left Spring Hill prison, and that was me being set up to succeed. And so I was really disappointed, and I came out to London, and I was just really fortunate enough that someone offered me a place to stay, and I met the most amazing woman, and within a few months of meeting her, I moved in, and since then it's gone from strength to strength. I was given the opportunity by moving in with her to actually write everything down. So I wanted to chronicle my last year in prison. I also wanted to explain about what got me there, and also part of my reformation. I was fortunate enough to actually be given an opportunity to go to a very unique prison called Grendon. It's a very unique experience. The whole prison has got 128 men, some of the worst criminals in the country, the most dangerous, some of the most heinous criminals who commit some atrocious acts. I'm talking, they killed their whole families, they killed kids, they raped, the serial killers. And then you had the token recidivists like myself and a few over the years. One is called Razor Smith, and another guy is called Ray Bishop, both ex-armed robbers. They'll turn their life around. So I read a book about Razor Smith and Ray, and decided that if I ever got in trouble or I ever found myself back in prison, I would definitely take up the opportunity to actually go and do it. And that was when I was really young. So I never ever thought I'd do it. But I found myself back in prison in 2008. I just received a 16-year, 9-month sentence for Verizon. And Verizon was a robbery that was considered one of the hardest jobs by the London criminal underworld. It was actually deemed impossible because it was located between three police stations right in the middle of London, right in the middle of the King's Cross. So I was a young up and coming criminal, or very established criminal at the time. Most people talk about their jobs, and my job was a criminal. That was it. So we was a full-time criminals. And what we used to do bonded warehouses. We used to do very unique jobs where we didn't use guns or we didn't use violence. For me, using violence and using guns pretty went out with the Stone Age. And the guys that I work with, very professional, highly motivated. One of them was ex-army, and the other guys that I worked with, I've worked with for a number of years, and I could trust every single one of them. So, and they were all capable guys, boxers, kickboxers, you name it. These guys they could really handle it. So when we were in a position where we could walk into anywhere and take it over or take it on. So so for many years, if how the London underworld works, there's different echelons of fixers. So you have your local fixers for your local jobs, and then you have your guys that do a little bit upmarket, and then you have the top echelons. And we were working with the top guys, and the jobs we were getting were 4, 5, 6, 10 million quid. And in 2007 we were approached by a well-to-do fixer, and he offered us a job, and when he actually started it, he was like, I can remember I sat there with open mouth because he gave me an impossible job, which to most people, they would have just said no. But for us and my team, it was something that we looked upon as a challenge. And Verizon was probably one of the biggest challenges we'd ever come across. If I on its website, it stated it was one of the most sophisticated. It had one of the most sophisticated security systems. I just run through it. So it had sort of 11 layers of physical security. There's a perimeter fence all around the back. It had overlapping cameras. So that's your standard cameras and your thermal cameras. But basically, the clarity or the clearness of it, night or day, was spot on. The main entrance doors there were all solid steel bulletproof glass, and they worked by a biometric keypad entry system, which also was operated by someone buzzing it in. So, and then once you're through that door, you then come into an air compression chamber, like an airlock chamber, and it works on an atmospheric pressure. So once you're in there, it has to pressurize, and both doors cannot open simultaneously. So you can't open the door, you just come in. You have to shut that one, and you open the next one, and you proceed into the secure lobby. In that lobby is a bulletproof reception area, so it's bulletproof glass, and behind it is a security guard, and behind them is another. It's called a CCT security suite, where you've got 3 security guards, and then monitoring all the CCT cameras around the building, and beside them they've all got panic buttons. So there's a bulletproof glass there behind now, and to your right you then have another biometric keypad entry system that works a turnstile. So you had to get through that as well, and plus another reinforced door to get back into them. So it was quite a complicated thing. So when I looked at it, I thought, if we can't use guns, we can't ram it, and we can't get in there without causing a stir because they're going to press the panic buttons. This is definitely going to be something that's going to be a challenge. And just to add on to an extra layer of security there, they also had an independent security company monitoring the hallway, and the hallway on the floor that we wanted, and also the room that we wanted to go in. So that was an independent security company. So we then had to locate the mainframe computer circuit room so we can disengage that whole corridor and that room. And as soon as that went off, we had to be in place downstairs in the security room where the independent security company would phone straight away. So as soon as we cut it, they phoned up. And luckily for us, when we did get in there, I was on the other end of the phone, and I said, they said that all their cameras had gone down, and I said, we've had a surge in the mainframe computer system, and our technicians are on it, and they'll be up and running in 20, maybe 25 minutes, and that's okay. And the guy said, no problem, I'll give you a call back, and then we went to work. We spent an hour in there, but the rules was how we got in there. We had a British Telecom van where we sat across the road for, I think it was 3.5 weeks. We had lots of information as far as what I just explained to you. We had schematics of the whole place. We had police uniforms. We had an old station dog, and we had vans, and we were, as I said, we were highly motivated, and when we did eventually go for it, it was one of those things that once you started, you couldn't turn back. But as I said, we had a British Telecom van across the road, and where we sat in there for days and days on end, and we knew everybody that worked there. We knew how many security guards. There was 10 security guards there on that particular night. There was 2 technicians and 3 cleaning staff. And then you had your random security tech guy would be coming in and out as the night went on. And we found that there was an opening from 9 o'clock till 10 o'clock where no one would be coming in. There'll be no, because every now and then when you do a security, you have to clock on the wall. And so when you go around, you clock on. And the more we watched it, we realised there was a window of opportunity, which was 1 hour. So we gave ourselves 1 hour to clear out just over 120 motherboards or penny chips. They were worth they were worth £5 million just on their own. But as I said, we were procured by a fixer. He had some real good connections within the Irish community, banking, and also the American community. And apparently it was that we were then tasked with receiving this on behalf of a banking syndicate to get the information on their motherboards out of there before that information was retrieved by certain police forces from America. I presume it was the FBI, we was told, and MI5. So when we went in, we had a window of opportunity. I think it was about 2 or 3 weeks before the place was going to be served the warrant. So we went in there. And we took the opportunity to actually relieve them of the motherboards. And as I said, no one got hurt. And a year later, I was arrested for it.
Yeah, it is amazing. I mean, especially to hear it like that with the amount of planning and preparation that goes into it. And I think obviously this is something you've talked about as well. But to hear the planning and the meticulous nature, not to mention the pressure you must be under to not miss a single detail, is just extraordinary. When you got out of there, though, I mean, immediately after the robbery, and it was a success, at least until that point, that you hadn't been caught yet. I mean, for people that have maybe only seen things like this on TV, or they don't know the sort of thing, what actually goes through your mind in a moment like that? Were you relieved? Were you just glad to get out of there, with the job done and everyone intact? Because this is something that I don't think people see. Because as you say, it was a challenge, and I know you've spoken in other interviews that other firms saw it as impossible to do. I believe you mentioned on Sean Atwood, I think, when you were talking with him. But you did succeed, and you did get out of there. So, as well as I say, I mean, in a moment like that, what does go through your mind? When you're sort of leaving with 100 million's worth of data.
But as I said to you before, a lot of what we do is about mindset. It's having it's having the confidence and the ability to do something is okay, but having that mindset to actually go up against an unknown force is what gives us our the impetus to actually succeed. I think for us it was really about leaving our mark, doing something that was impossible, but it was just a normal day at the office for us. I'm not, I would love to turn around and say, you know what, it was probably one of the hardest jobs we've ever done, blah blah blah. However, it was a pretty straightforward job. Once everything started going into place, it just worked. Normally, 4 weeks up into a job when we planned it, that's probably the worst time for me. Actually, the job was really easy, and the after was pretty easy. But the mental torture that you go through 4 weeks up to the job is probably the worst for me, because what happens, you mentally go through it in your head a million times, but what you do, you don't go through it where you succeed, you go through it where you fail. You get wrecked, you get nicked, you get ready-eyed, if nothing goes to plan, the cameras don't go off, the alarm system goes off, the security guards overpower you, or you get caught between the airlock door and the foyer, so you can't go out. There's so many stuff that goes through your head that drive you insane. And most normal people would quit then and there. I've met lots of guys over the years that just going through that mental process, they drive themselves mad and they quit. I think it takes a very unique person to actually, start something like this and actually see it through. There's not many people. There's lots of people that think they can do it. There's lots of people that are legends in their own head. But to actually go and do something and actually be really calm, because it ain't like you've got a shotgun or guns in your hand and you can, that's your power. Because that's, for me, doing jobs with guns and all that, that's all that, it's a 50-50 thing, and you can end up killing someone. For me, it's always been something I've always pretty shied away with in my adult life. So, it's a 50-50 chance, and there's a 50-50 chance you're going to kill someone, a 50-50 chance you're going to get 27, 30 years for doing that or whatever. So for me, what we did was a little bit more intellect. We had to think it through, we had to plan it, and then we had to execute it. So for us, it was because of the preparation that went into it, and when we actually left there, and there was no trouble, and it went the way we wanted, and there was no violence. There was a certain amount of sort of camaraderie between us that we could actually do something. I felt when I come out there, I felt an elation that you wouldn't believe. That we'd actually done it, because we was in there for an hour. We had 16 people tied handcuffs to the rail downstairs. We as I said, we were well organised. We had an old station dog. We was all dressed in police uniforms, and the guys that we took with us, because we took 5 guys with us that were technicians, and we left them in the room. And the reason they called us the Real Ocean's 11 job is that we had 20 bags, the laundry bags, the big ones. So we had them all the way along the corridor, and every single one of them was filled with motherboards, and that was that prize. And then when we called it at 10 o'clock to get out of there. I think it was about 8 minutes to 10, because we had to be out of there by 10 o'clock, because of the police and the patrols. So when we called it, we all came out, and it just looked like that every person on the 10 of us, we all had 2 bags on our shoulders. And as we came down, we came down the stairs, and we all went out the front, and we put the bags in. It was akin to one of the Ocean's 11, and that's why they called us the Ocean's 11 gang. Unfortunately, we were the real ones, and they were the fake ones. Yeah. I said it. There's a lot of euphoria, and there's a bit, there's a lot of slapping on the back. We done it. It was a really great job. And at the time, I was really entrenched in the fact that I was a criminal. So my mentality then was it was one for celebration. I planned it with my guys. It wasn't just one person. I'd got offered the job. I'd gone down and looked at it, and I'd convinced my guys that this is what it is. But without my other 4 guys, there's 5 of us that were the team. Without them and their input, it would never have got done. So, there's no mastermind. There's just 5 guys, very highly motivated. And as I've always told everybody, the reason that we were so successful is because everybody knew what they were doing. So the minute we walked in there, he had to do that job, he had to do that job, he had to do that job, and he done it. There was no room for error. There was no room for, for blaming someone if it failed, because everybody knew their job. And if it went down because we done our job, then such is life. But we would never ever fail simply because we messed it up. It would have failed simply because it was an unknown factor in the job. But as I said, it's one of those things, and we were here. We got away with it as far as the job itself. We then delivered the motherboards to the people that wanted it, and then their motherboards were taken out of the country straight away and never to be seen again. And the information on them.
Amazing. It is an amazing insight, because obviously, bear in mind with this, we will talk about different aspects of your life as well as the robbery itself.
Yeah.
But considering it's obviously the biggest thing you're known for, it's incredible to get the insight of the before, the after. Obviously, talking about this at the point that it didn't go well, a year later, you were eventually caught. With this interview, I am targeting this to people that have read the books and the people who have not. So, so some of the questions for people who know about your story, some for who don't. For the people who don't know, we've got to the point where you did get away with it, but when it did eventually catch up with you, that period of time later, and you were actually caught and obviously eventually sent down for this. For anyone that doesn't know the story, can you walk us through what happened there in terms of how it did catch up with you in the end?
Yeah. I was, as I said, I've got a few good friends. Only 2 of us have ever been nicked for this, and unfortunately, there was a few friends of ours, or a few people in the game that were using police uniforms, and they'd been caught on a similar job with the same MO, and because we were known associates with them, the police decided to give our photographs and show them to the security guys, because there was a number of high value robberies at that time with police officers, in bonded warehouse all around the country, and I think at one stage we had 50 police forces come down and interviewed us. So they were quite excited when they nicked us. But they gave our picture and showed our picture, and I can remember, the Verizon security guys picked me out and said, "That's the guy that orchestrated it. That's the guy that done all the talking." Because when we we actually go to work, we have one person that does all the talking, and unfortunately that was me. So you don't got no chat. We all had mics on, and we had comms, and you can't have 5, 6 people talking at the same time. So we had one person, that was me. One person talks, one person orchestrates it. I called it when we go. I called it when we go in, and that was it. So because I put my voice up front, my face up front, unfortunately, it cost me 16 years, 9 months of my life when the security guard picked me out as a main man. Which on the retrospect, as I think back of it now, was probably one of the best things that ever happened to me. Because it gave me an opportunity to reevaluate my life, take stock of it, and then most people don't realise that when you're in a prison cell for 24 hours a day, it gives you a lot of time for reflection. But just going back to when I got arrested, I can remember I was a couple of hours away from going to Thailand. I got a passport sorted out, and I was on my way over to Thailand. And I'd bought all my clothes, I had my ticket sorted and everything else, but I was waiting for my passport to be dropped off through some contacts I had. And I can remember just walking up the road to go to get something to eat. And it was about 5:30, just getting a little bit dark. And I walked up the road, walked through it, like around a roundabout, and as I was walking along, a car came onto the pavement, heading towards me. I was on the phone at the time. One of my pals was in London, because I was up in Lee Grade, just outside Luton. And I can remember saying to him, "Oh fuck!" Threw my phone over the wall. And as I turned around, another car was coming at the back of me, and then a van came by the side of me. And next thing, as I looked up, there was this old bill running, must be 20 or 25, 30 of them all coming towards me. I didn't jump up in the air to try and stop the car from smashing into my legs. I then rolled onto the bonnet, rolled onto the floor, and then next thing I was looking up, and I was handcuffed after a little scuffle. And at the time it was probably the worst time ever, but that sort of passed straight away. And then for me it was a relief. All the weight of the world. So I've been on the run for 9 months. I felt relief. I never felt anything other than, well, you know what, I've done it now. I'll do 10 years in prison or whatever they're going to throw at me, and I can start fresh. So it was an opportunity to. It's a little bit like being a Christian. You get baptized and you get an opportunity to start your life again. You get reborn as a Christian, and as a criminal, when you do your sentence, you get an opportunity to change your life. You either come back out and you do it, like a lot of guys do, because, as I said, most people that go to prison don't go because they're changed, they want to change. They go because they got caught. And rehabilitation in its present form doesn't work. And basically they're set up to fail. I was extremely fortunate because of my crime, and because I had an escape attempt when I first got nicked. I went out on a production order for an ID parade. I ended up smashing a copper. I ended up, trying to get over the wall. I was apprehended by 8-Old Bill. I was returned to prison in handcuffs, and I had a busted shoulder, busted eye, a couple of broken ribs. And they deemed I was a little bit off key. My thinking was slightly off key, which at the time I suppose they were right, because I always had this really powerful voice in my head that gave me the impetus, the strength, and then the willpower to do anything I wanted. I thought I was above the law. I actually thought that I was the victim in all this. I lived outside the law, but I actually thought I was one of the good guys. And trying to escape was part of that. But I got nicked, and I got apprehended for escape, and I got put in the patches. And then I was returned to Pentonville prison and charged with escape. And then as I was seeing a doctor, he said, Mr. Ellis, I really think you need to see a psychologist or a psychiatrist, and we can recommend one for you. And I said, oh, fuck off. However, he did put my name down, and a number of weeks later, someone came around and spoke to me, and first of all I told him to jog on, and then I started speaking, and I realised that I'd never actually spoken about, because I was put in care when I was 11, but I never actually spoke about my childhood. I never spoke about criminality. I was physically and mentally abused as a kid in reform school, and some of the places I was abandoned as 11 years old, put into a home. And I normalised that. So there was a lot of anger, there was a lot of frustration, a lot of resentment towards people in authority. I had dyslexia, so again I thought I was stupid. So that then gave me embarrassment, made me more angry. It wasn't a very good start in life. Unfortunately, because of that start, I then was put into care homes. I went to reform school, and if anyone's ever been in a reform school, a men's reform school or a kids reform school, it's like a battleground. And what you do, you hone your skill. Your skill is violence. You're constantly fighting every single day. And for fun, you're fighting. So it gets to the point where you hate it, and it's for fun. And it's a part of growing up. And then unfortunately, when I did come out of reform school at 16 years old, I was really big. I was quite muscular. I was a powerful guy. And because I was really violent, but I also had a pretty good idea about doing things. I was actually recruited by some people that thought I'd be good at doing robberies, banks, building societies, vans, everything else. And I spent a little bit of time doing that with them. And then I got a prison sentence when I was a kid, got a couple of years. And then I went into an older prison with older guys. And it was like going back to college. It was like a university of crime. And unfortunately, the whole network involved criminality. So, and that's why I say when people go to prison, they don't go to prison to reform. They don't go to prison to be rehabilitated, because it's non-existent in prison. we have rehabilitation programs in prison. Unfortunately, they don't work. I think if you look at the 75% of people that reoffend within the first 2 and 5 years, that's not a success story. That's a fucking disaster. However, I got an opportunity to do Grendon at 228 men, and I was advised strongly by some of my friends, some of my underworld pals, and said, "Fuck me, why would you put yourself through that? These guys are the worst of the worst. They're the beast. They called it. Said, they actually said you'll be living amongst the beasts, and that's why I got the name for the book eventually. But I thought, you know what? I've been in the prison as a young guy. I've been in the prison as an adult, and I never learned anything. So I really, I just received 16 years, 9 months. My whole life up to that point had been, I grasped it with both hands, and I went for it. And it was by far the hardest bit of work I've ever done. It was by far the hardest sentence I've ever done, because one, I couldn't use violence there, to get my own way. I had to learn to talk. I had to learn to articulate. But I also had to listen to some of the most heinous crimes. People that had killed kids, their whole families, and it was one of the most traumatic experiences I think I ever put myself through. However, I learned tolerance from that. I learned understanding. But as it unraveled over the 2.5 years I learned empathy. I learned to deal with boredom. I learned to deal with shame, embarrassment. I had a lot of shame around being dyslexic, so that made me volatile, made me angry. So I learned to deal with that. My embarrassment because of that as well. My ego was massive. I was doing jobs from the age of 16, robbing, securities, post offices, building sites, banks. I thought I was untouchable. I was exactly what I was supposed to be, a criminal. Because statistically, being in the reform school, leaving with no education, I was exactly what I was supposed to be. And but for going to Grendon and actually going through that and talking about my childhood experience, I realised that my childhood had really fucked me up. Being abandoned as a kid, I had abandonment issues, I had anger issues, and being able to talk for it for the first time and understand it made me less angry. I started to calm down a bit, and where I couldn't use anyone's offences against them, the people I was talking to, I then had to start articulating in response to them. So instead of swearing at them and everything else and eliciting a response that was disproportionate to what I was saying, I then started to talk to people, engage with people like that. So my articulation started getting better. My confrontational skills, conflict resolution skills got better. Because, before I went to Grendon, if anyone looked at me funny or said anything to me, I'd just whack them in the jaw. If I was right, I was right. If I was wrong, I was still right, because I'll just give them a whack. And when you have a set of rules that you live by, and they're quite Neanderthal, you're never gonna get the opportunity to change. I still know guys now in their 50s and 60 years old that have never had the opportunity to actually transgress from an adolescent to an adult, simply because they're still stuck in that world. I see criminality for what it was. I was very parasitic. There's no honour amongst some of the thieves that I've met. I have a lot of respect for the guys I work with. I have a lot of respect for some of the top criminals in this country. Because they don't hurt people. They're very monetary orientated, and as far as I was always concerned, as long as they don't hurt anyone, good luck to them. Well, unfortunately, my views have completely changed now. I'm now completely out of that life. So now I'm working an honest life, and for me, it's so much more rewarding getting up every day. I used to work 24/7 as a criminal. I worked in Amsterdam. I worked in Amsterdam for a few years, but before that, I actually worked in Spain. I was delivering puff. So I would buy it, pack it, take it up to Valencia, put it on a lorry, and then it would land wherever it was landing. I'd sell it, and I started doing really well, nicking quite a good bit of money doing that. And then one of the guys I was working with, he had an accident in the car one night and unfortunately died. So I had to again reevaluate my life, and I decided that maybe I needed a change of scenery. And I ended up in Amsterdam, and I was working with some Serbian guys. They were ex-military guys, and they're really lovely fellas. We were buying everything. We were shipping gear all around the gaff, and I can remember working with them, and I was doing something this particular night, and I came back and spoke to another one of my sons. They said, Sergio's been killed. He's been shot in the head, shot through the eyes, shot in the head. He's dead. And my other pal, George, he's been shot in the back and crippled. So I decided to get out of Dodge a bit sharpish as well after that. Ended up in France, and I started doing cigarettes. So you know what? Because of my criminal connections, it wasn't like I went straight. I went from one to the other. So next month, I spent a couple of years doing cigarettes out of Luxembourg, Germany, Antwerp, everywhere. And then I ended up back in London, where I was selling cocaine, by the way, for the Colombians. I was doing 50, 100K every couple of weeks for them. And then I put myself in a position where I'd met some people, and we had decided to import, tons of weed. I ended up in Cambodia, and I ended up, I did, I think, 28 tons of weed, bringing it into England and doing what I was doing, blah blah. And my life was just like was criminally based, but but what that life brought to me was drugs, cocaine, was lots of women, lots of in meaningful relationships. I had a family, my kids, but the life dictated that, because I was living in different parts of the world and mixing with different people. The whole thing is so seedy. It's prostitutes, it's alcohol, it's drugs, and it's the life. And unfortunately, what started for me as trying to get money from my kids to have a nice house, a nice car, send them to private school, and live a life that I could be proud of, or they could be proud of. I had this other life that didn't actually resemble who I was. So what started as something really good, and then something really bad, because I then found myself doing copious amounts of cocaine. I had women for breakfast, dinner, tea, supper in the middle of the night. There's so many women I didn't even know any of their names. Because that's the life that's the life that money I earned afforded me. Because you can't do anything other than party. I mean, you earn it easy, you don't respect it, and unfortunately, you then get into a mindset where you treat everyone like idiots. You think you're better than everyone else, because they're not as smart as you, they're not as wealthy as you, and they've not reached the top of the pinnacle of the ladder as you. So you have this sort of fucking false air of grandeur that you're better than everyone else, and all of a sudden you get nicked, and it all comes crashing down, because now you're in a cell. You're having to share a cell with someone, and the thing that you value most in your life, like having a shit on your own. You've now got to do it in front of someone else twice a day. You've now got to piss in front of someone twice or 4 or 5 or 10 times a day. And the funny thing is, he's going to do it as well in front of you. So now you've got to smell his fucking shit. So now you've got the smell of him. You've got socks, BO, cigarette smoke, bad breath. And you're stuck in a cell with some mug or someone you don't even know. And you don't like the same telly, you don't like the same conversation, and all of a sudden, the life that you've led has led you to that. And I think everyone thinks that because you're a criminal, you can accept prison. Prison is a fucking hell. You know, when I can remember. I mean, the night that the night before I got nicked for Verizon. No, I got nicked for I think it was 2 kilo of cocaine. 2000 when the SARS went up. The night before that, I was actually out with Kate Moss, and she was on my knee, and we was in a party, and everyone was doing bits and pieces, and I was having a great time. I was in a £12 million ass, and here I was the next day sitting in a cell looking at the wall, and it was all graffitied up. Leroy was here, fucking Terry was here, Pete was here, and the date. And this is my life. This is going to be my life for the next, whatever, And that's when the reality of what I had done came crushing down on me. And that's when I decided that enough was enough. Unfortunately, when you're in prison, you go through that madness, and then you have this sort of window of opportunity to change. But unfortunately, you come out, you've got nowhere to live. You've got no money. And the first thing that most prisoners do, or prisoners, they revert back to type. I got, as soon as I came out on this sentence, I got people offering me for like 5 and 10 kilo cocaine, 20 kilo heroin, 1,000 kilo weed. I'll tell, get back on your feet, mate. You're doing me a favour. They want me to sell their gear, and they're doing me the favour, and I'm earning them the money, putting myself at risk. So I decided enough was enough. And when I came out this side, I decided that I wouldn't do it. I became a born again Christian in Spring Hill, and that's I got baptized, and the deal I made with God was, if you let me start my new life from today, and you don't make me want for anything, then I'll play the game. And I can always remember that one of the guys I met, he said, all God asks of you is if you come to me and let me do the rest. So I said, okay. I'm not one who reads the Bible every day and goes to church every week. It's not me. But I wanted to have a clean slate, so I got baptized. And since then, I've just done good things. I've decided that I would help others instead of just taking all the time. And that's what really has set me up on the road I am now in my reformation. One was doing Grendon and giving myself an opportunity to look at my behaviour and look at my thinking skills, because we are what we think, and that I actually turned it on its head. So now when I get offered anything, I look at everything. I look at the possibility of getting caught and what effect that would have on the rest of my life and my family. Where before I would act on impulse, and I would throw caution to the wind and give it a 50-50 shot. But now my life is too precious to give anything a 50-50 shot. It's really now about doing what's right. And what is right is actually doing what I'm doing now. I run a knife crime campaign called Change Your Life, Put Down Your Knife, with a guy called Ben Span, as I already told you. And we're doing really great work with the kids and a few manufacturing courses we set up. And the most important thing, I'm working with my daughter and my son-in-law, and we've created a really, really great business called Scoff Meals, where we do nutritious meals to gyms and to the public, and our business has gone from our kitchen to now employing 14 people, 4,000 square feet, and really we've gone from strength. We've had, this is our 4th kitchen now. We've gone from strength to strength. It's our kitchen. We own everything, and that's the work that we put into that. It's 24 hours a day for the last 3.5 years, and what, to see it grow and grow and grow is more rewarding than anything I've ever done before. All the millions I earn, all the hundreds of thousands of pounds I spent on frivolously, on women and drugs and everything else, and cars, watches, everything else, doesn't even come anywhere close to how great I feel now and the life I lead now. And what I do now, I go into schools and I talk about role models. I talk about aspiring to be someone that's not going to spend 20 years in prison or 30 years. I talk about ego. Ego, shame, and embarrassment are the biggest contributing factors to people killing each other. If your ego gets busted on the street, you want to shank someone. Someone talks out of school, you want to stab them. But you've got so much to prove because you've got an ego. And I tell him, I'll show him, it doesn't physically hurt. Shame, embarrassment, and ego does not physically hurt. And I try to put them in situations where they can go through that, and then actually after they've thought about it, they become a little bit more stronger and stronger. There's something you just can't talk. You need to put yourself through them conflict resolutions on a regular basis to realise that someone calls you a prick or a cunt or whatever it is, you don't have to respond with violence or likewise. You just have to accept it. That's his problem. The minute you can accept it, and it's a hard thing. When someone calls you a name or decries you, it's the hardest thing is not to just go and whack them on the jaw. So it takes a real good strength of character to actually not do that, not to revert back to type. So, we're training kids now from some of the talks we're doing. If we can train one, we can train two, and we can keep that guy doing 21 years or 30 years for stabbing someone or taking some mother's son, then I'm really pleased, because that's my aim. My aim in there is to change some of the kids that I meet's lives and get them away from knife crime, get them out of the gangs, and get them out entrepreneurial. Because most of the kids I know, they're drug dealers. They're very entrepreneurial. They can't. Most of them can't dyslexic. They can't read or write, so they're very entrepreneurial. So they got other skills. And most criminals I know have got transferable skills. I've got transferable skills where I can talk now, and I'm entrepreneurial, so I'm earning money. And I know that if we give these guys an opportunity to change their lives in a way that gives them self-worth and confidence, and gives them a reason to get up every day, they will change their life. But it's hard, because now, you've got 2 or 3 generations of kids living in one house. So, there's no, and they're being told you shouldn't commit crime. And then they are seeing the three generations of their parents. They can't get a flat of their own because now rents are the highest that they've ever been in their history. So, if you'll get your own kid and you're only making 200 or 300 quid a week, you just left school and your rent's 200 or 300 quid. You then got to pay poll tax, you then got to pay your gas, electricity, everything. It's actually viable for them to go back at it and commit crime. So, so it's a real battle. It's a real hard battle to convince them that this is only a short-term gap. You need to get out there, you need to find yourself. And once you do that, you will grow, and then your job opportunities will get better. Your educational skills and your everything will start expanding, and then all of a sudden, what you thought was a weakness will become your biggest strength, and all of a sudden they start growing. And the kids that go and sell drugs and everything go to prison, and then when they're 20 or 30 years old, they come out, they don't want to work, they're going at it again, they get nicked again, and all of a sudden they're in their 40s, and there's no way back. So we can grab them while they're 17, 18, 19, 20, and I think that we've got a good chance of turning their lives around. Hence, I just wrote another book about early intervention and about everything I learned in Brendan, which I'm hoping going to be releasing at the end of this year. But it's already rare. We're just finalising the detail now. But it's an early intervention book. It covers about ego, embarrassment, hedonistic lifestyle, and it tells you how to combat that conflict resolution, empathy, everything. Because you can learn them. It's one of those things that you can learn. I never had a lot of empathy for anybody, and that's why I was able to do the things I did. But the minute I started speaking to victims and what I put them through, and what they actually went through as an ordeal, the embarrassment, the shame of being robbed, I couldn't go any other way apart from not doing it. But, so there's lots of things I've learned. But dealing with all my demons by doing therapy. I self-medicated for years and years and years. And it was only when I dealt with all my issues of abandonment, childhood issues, embarrassment, everything else, I didn't need to self-medicate no more. So now I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't mess around. I've got one girlfriend I've been with for 5 years now. And again, my life is so much more rewarding about all that in my life. So if you look at my life and how it's been, you would have said, there's no way on God's earth this guy will ever change. And I spend all my time saying we are more than our parts and we can change. And if I can do it, and I get lots of people phoning me, I get lots of people writing to me from all around the world, and they say, how can I get there? And it's purely about mindset. It's about mindset, and it's a bit about circumstances. If you can change your circumstances, in your mindset, then you can crack it. It's not that bad, you know. But there are factors that will help you. You know, that when we talk about rehabilitation, you know, I know it doesn't work. But if you give someone somewhere to live, education, an apprenticeship, a skill, then you give that guy or that person an opportunity to actually earn a living and actually be a productive member of society. You know, so, and that's what's lacking at the moment, because most of the guys that leave prison, unfortunately, they're living they're living in tents. But if you actually look at the statistics inside prison, the statistics of an ex-prisoner leaving prison is they've actually got, the prisons have actually got a 92% success rate of housing ex-offenders, which on paper is right. But what really happens is that when you leave prison, you get a travel one after you've done quite a long sentence. And what happens when you get a travel, you have to give an address or a postcode. That's classed as a successful rehousing because you've got a postcode and an address, even though you're going to leave 5 minutes later. That's fucking 10. But on paper, you left with somewhere to live, and that's the problem. You know, we are setting up generations and generations of guys leaving prison simply because we're not prepared to actually help them and give them the support they actually need. We spend £40,000 a year on them while they're in prison. You know, and we give them that, but if they come out of prison and say, listen, right, I'm going to go back to type and start thieving again because I can't do this and I can't afford this, but I need some help. We go, no, you can't. The only way we're going to give you some help and spend £40,000 a year on you is if you get nicked. You know what I mean? And to put someone through the criminal justice system, that's from lawyers to the crime they commit to police time, going to court and everything else. It's 119,000 quid. It just doesn't make sense. You know, so for me, it's about, we really need to evaluate the rehabilitation system in this country, and then it really set guys up to succeed instead of fail. So I keep saying the same thing, really, simply because I'm right, and I wrote a book about it called the Resettlement Diaries, to find countdown to my freedom. And the reason I wrote it, I chronicled my whole time in a decamp prison. I met so many guys that have been through that revolving door of recidivism. You know, they've done 10 years or 8 years or 5 years. And when I saw them back in prison, what happened? And they say, well, you know, I went out, I had all good intentions, but life issues brought me back to, you know, I never had nowhere to live. I stayed on someone's city. He was a pisshead. We had an argument. I ended up doing him, and then I ended up getting another 6 years. I got recalled. You know, but he said, if I'd have gone out with somewhere to live and I'd have got a job, I wouldn't have been back here. But, you know, if we can just tweak these little things, you know, I think the success rate of people going back would be a lot better. We talk about education in prison. You know, I saw so many guys in prison that have had all the advantages in life, and they've had good educations, they come from good homes, they've had all the advantages, but yet they go out and commit crime because they're greedy. But when they go in prison, the first thing they do, they all go to education. You know, it's like an easy copy. You don't have to work, you don't have to do the landings, you don't have to do nothing. And that's the 60% of people going in are really well educated now. You know, we're talking real people that have had good education and everything else. But that 40% that have got dyslexia, that are disruptive and unmanageable. What we do with them while they're in prison is we say, well, we can't put them through education because they're too disruptive. So what we're going to do, we're going to put this 60% that have had all the advantages through, because now on paper it looks good. It looks good because because you get paid by results in prison, unfortunately, and every person that does a test, that's another feather in the cap for the service providers that actually implement these rehabilitation courses. So they'd rather have the 60% that don't give them any shit, and then they regurgitate them through and through and through, and that's classed as success. They won't come back because they've had every advantage anyway. But this 40% that have been left to rot on the landings, who we should be targeting, unfortunately, they go out of prison, they come back again, they go out and they come back. We should have a system that actually says, regardless if they're disruptive, regardless if they're embarrassed and they've got shame because they can't read or write and everything else, we need to figure out a way of educating this 40%. Because the 60% that don't come back, if we can turn this 40% into the same mindset as these guys, then maybe we could cut the prison system in half or a third, and hopefully we can save a fortune and hopefully reinvest that money in actually helping these guys instead of against cinema. But I've lived it. I've lived it for 15, 20 years. I've seen it all. I've seen all the lies. I've seen the MPs come in and saying what a great job they're doing with rehabilitation and rehab ex-offenders. And I've seen the actual reality of the situation when they're just lying. It's all lip service. So, you know, but far be it from me, if we could have an independent monitoring company that actually went in and actually saw the progress that these rehabilitation courses do, they would then go in there, throw them all out, and actually give out these guys something that's going to change their life, whether it's bricklaying, computer systems, everything else, something that's going to set them up to succeed. I could go on, but I think you get my message, yeah.
Yeah, it's incredible because obviously you've lived it and you've seen it from all angles, and it is an incredible message. I mean, the work that you're doing, obviously with the knife crime with the food is exceptional, but the message of reforming that, I agree. And it's I think it's a problem with the system as it is, obviously with prisons, but even with the education system and with so many things, they sort of got a one size fits all
Yeah.
mentality. Instead of people who've got different abilities. Some people are really good with their hands. Some people are really, and not everyone's academic, and I definitely see that to an extent, even in the regular school system, but never mind like in the prison system where it's worse again. Um, but it's a powerful message for change, and I think obviously people like you who've lived through it and everything like that, can change that and can keep putting the word out there that it needs to change, and really highlight it to a lot of people that don't realize, unless they know someone who's been in there or they've been in there themselves or whatever. So, so it is a powerful thing, and it's something I'm really glad that we can get out with this talk today as well, because obviously it has the reach to get out there to a lot of people as well. But, the thing is, we've talked about some really good stuff here because it's been really good, like in depth in terms of the highs and the lows of your life. And I know I said it before, but how you've changed your mentality and the inside aspect of it is incredible. And obviously, if you keep sharing that, a lot of people's lives will change, by example, and a lot of people will. And it's not as literal as just stopping the crime and changing habits like that, but it's everything you said about the emotions, about the mindset, about everything like that. It's really really powerful for people listening. Whether they're watching this, listening to this, whether they're just starting out down that road, whether they're a bit further down it, whether they know someone else was going down it, like in the family or whatever. You show people that you can change in that very deep way, and really, I just want to say a big thank you for obviously being so open and sharing everything that you shared on here today, and and big for coming on as well.
It's my pleasure. I just want to talk. There's one second before you go. Is
Anything, yeah.
I spent many years on drugs and cocaine and everything else, and when I was in prison, I saw lots of guys that were on heroin. And, there's a cottage industry of drugs inside prison. Unfortunately, we have a care system inside prison that actually gets paid for giving out medication. So what's happening inside prison is where you should go in, and if you're on heroin, you should go on methadone for 3 months, and then you should get weaned off it, and then you can actually start your life and try and change it. But there are guys in prison who've been on methadone for 6 and 8 years, which is crazy. When you think it's somewhere, methadone was supposed to wean you off it, because it's actually a human right to actually stay on methadone for 8 or 10 years while you're in prison. Also, as I said, there's a cottage industry of drugs. We talk about heroin and we talk about spice and we talk about puff in prison. But the biggest problem inside prison is prescription drugs. Painkillers. The derivatives of the painkiller. They burn down and they have. The morphine, everything, all the tablets and everything. When I first went into prison years ago, you went to the prison hatch and you had 5 or 6 guys there at any one time. But what they've done inside most of the prisons, they privatised them. So now they get paid. They get paid for as many people as they see. And what they do now, anyone that goes to there, they just give them painkillers. You've now got 300 or 400 guys in the mornings queuing up for painkillers. Now, if you consider that a strip of painkillers or 2 or 3 painkillers will get you half an ounce of tobacco, you realise why these guys are all getting them painkillers every single day, because A normal guy will have to work all week to get half hands with his job. And if you go to education, you have to work a whole week in education to actually afford an ounce of tobacco. So it pays to actually go on the sick inside prison and take all this prescription drugs. It's crazy, the way it's working inside. But everything now is private. It's all private service providers inside prison. And unfortunately, with the housing and the drugs and the healthcare, it's all based on numbers through doors. The more people they can get through there and sign their bits of paper and do their sheets, and they audit, it looks like it's a massive success. Unfortunately, it's not. It's just really like a den of inequity in there. We're giving out drugs like confetti. And as I said, the revolving door of any education department is only catering for people that have had good education. So something really needs to be done. And I just hope that someone, listens to this. We can get our message across. Because we need to take the politics out of prison. We need to stop. Every 4 years, we get a different government come through, and they all think they can change it. So they go in there and they change it, and they fuck it all up. We need to take the politics out of prisons and let the people who actually run the prisons, who are the governors and the prison officers, because they know how to deal with inmates, and then they can implement a system that actually works, instead of every time they take one step forward, they have to take 10 steps back every time a new government comes in. We've had it with Grading, we've had it with Gove, we've had it with Clark, we've had it with all of them. They've all come in and they completely fucks it up over the years. Unfortunately, I said I've seen it all, and what I'm saying, it can be evidence. I remember Chris Grading coming in and decided to stop people getting books sent in, and then all of a sudden he wanted to stop people getting stamps sent in. So the whole thing was about maintaining contact with your family. If you can't write to them, so you wanted to stop stamps. If you want to educate people, you send them books. But you wanted to stop both things. It's crazy. But we just need to take the politics out of it and hopefully get it to a stage where the people that actually know what they're doing can run the prison. I think eventually it will level itself out. But in the meantime, we have a prison in chaos. And, the reason that we know so much about what's going inside prison now, and I know I shouldn't really say this because I'll probably be lambasted, the best thing that happened to prison was mobile phones. Because now we can see what actually goes on in there. Where the MPs were saying rehabilitation was working and doing it else, you can now see geezers with mobile phones dancing about on the wings, punching each other in the face, all smoking spice, all having parties, and all on their PlayStation 24/7, having a massive party. The government can't get away from it. So something has to be implemented inside prison that needs to bring it down to a level where people are going to start changing. Because at the moment, it's like free fall. It's like complete chaos in there at the moment. And I know this because I speak to a lot of guys still from prison, and they all tell me it's like a den of inequity in there. And these guys are hardened criminals, and they're suffering. So it's not a good place to be. I wouldn't recommend it to anybody.
Yeah, that is incredible. I mean, some of the behind the scenes, that you don't see. Obviously, you've lived it. I mean, yeah, the mobile phones. That's a very good point, actually. That I think a lot of people don't think of. You have seen what it's like, and yeah, I've even seen reports and even mates of mine in there where they're actually sending stuff out, and you think, bloody hell, that's what's going on. And it's a really good point, actually. But yeah, there needs to be change, and it's definitely obviously coming from people like yourself who've been through it and have seen. Basically, the ways where it falls short in that way. It is a powerful message. I mean, it's a powerful message with your story, not to end up there in the first place, because it doesn't really take you anywhere. But obviously, for the people that do end up there, there needs to be some changes on to really help them out and make it not just about money, but about actually, improving people. And that, yeah, that is a very powerful message, because honestly, a lot of them are probably in a very similar situation to like what you were going through on a sort of mental and emotional level, being closed off and going through these experiences growing up and not empathizing with people, etc. And if you were, teaching people that on a broader scale, there'd be some big changes. Absolutely, like I say, just acknowledging some of these things like the shame, the embarrassment, and all that. I agree totally. I mean, it's definitely. I definitely think there's a lot of people out there. As much as there's a lot of problems with the government, there's a lot of people, yourself included, doing work, getting the word out there to change it.
Well, you know what? As when I wrote "Living Amongst the Beasts," I wanted to really expose some of the stuff that was going on in Grendon. Because I felt that there was a lot of people there that didn't. That were actually just going through the city. There was lots of rapists, paedophiles there, child killers and everything else, and murderers and everything else. But they were just going there because they wanted to tick a box. But I also felt that they were learning so many different skills that they were actually making them more proficient predators. So that was why I wanted to write a book. But I couldn't go any other way apart from champion Grendon. It's not the medicine that actually cures recidivism or would turn everyone's life around, because it's quite a unique place. And it's been proven that there's the same take-up rate as a normal prison as there is in Grendon as far as reoffending is concerned. But what I did notice more than anything else there is that when people started talking about their childhoods and their past, the anger went. And one thing I can say about Grendon is that of all the prisons I've been to, and I've been to some of the most violent prisons in England, with Wandsworth, Swaleside, I've seen people get oiled, boiling oil chucked in their face. I've seen people get stabbed, everything. I've seen it all. But Grendon, because people are allowed to speak and deal with their past, the actual violence there was non-existent. It was, and people actually started working on a completely different level. Once they got rid of that anger, over it never just happened overnight. I'm talking about when you do therapy, you talk about your frustrations and your anger and everything that's happened to you in your life. It's like opening a little tap. And all that anger starts to dissipate. It just goes and goes. So you're not so angry anymore, and that anger normally turns to violence goes as well. And that's the one thing. The one thing I actually got from Grendon is the fact that the people became less aggressive, less confrontational, and they started to articulate. And that's the real good thing about my whole experience there, is being able to talk. I was never able to have a conversation with anyone, believe it or not, because the only thing I knew was crime. I could talk about crime until I was blue in the face, because that was the only topic I knew. But to have conversations about politics, about psychology, about empathy, about shame, hedonistic lifestyle, and about just psychoanalysis, and talk about the mentality of why we do the things we do and why others do the things they do, and what drives you to kill and what drives you to stab, and all the elements that come together to make you that person. The good thing about Grendon is that you were able to psychoanalyze all that, and you made up your own. So, if you ever get an opportunity to see all these self-help gurus and everything, the one thing that it all boils down to at the end of the day is that you've got all the answers in your head. If you're fat and you're looking in the mirror, I'm not going to come and ask you, how do I get thin? I know from looking in the mirror that, I've got to stop fucking eating. I've got to stop eating, I've got to start training. That's the only way I'm going to get thin. If I'm coughing my bollocks off and it's all coming out every day, I've got to pack up smoking. We know all the answers to all the problems in our lives. All we need to do is ask the right questions, and ask them honestly, and then give ourselves an honest appraisal of the question that we just asked ourselves. We don't need to go on all these sites and see all these gurus and pay fortunes for their lectures and everything else and see their motivation speeches. You've got all the answers you have there. That's the one thing I learned over the years, is that I already knew them anyway. I just don't know how to access them in a way that would benefit me. But through the life skills that I learned and the coping strategies that I learned in Grendon, which I'm putting into my books, and to give people the opportunity to actually learn, I'm now able to function on a completely different level. So where now my life is so much more productive. Before it was just on a level where I didn't learn anything. Now I'm constantly striving for perfection. I'm constantly striving to better myself, but I'm also trying to find strategies that help other people. So and that was the beauty about Grendon. I didn't want it to be a success, but there were so many good things about it that I couldn't go any other way apart from say, yeah, it actually worked on so many levels.
Wow. Yeah, it is incredible testament to it. And I'd say for anyone out there obviously wants to know more about that, obviously read Terry's books. But you know, it is an incredible system that they set up and putting people in touch with themselves. You know, in that way. Is just is unique, you know, being in touch with their real selves, in touch with their motivations. And so many of these things, you know, behavior patterns that people were doing are learned. And so many of them are sort of put on people anyway, you know, by their environments and by things they grew up with and all this. And then people sort of pick them up and think, well, that's mine. When actually that behavior pattern was probably given to you by someone else or learned by someone else, and it's not taking the responsibility away, but it was never yours to begin with, something you picked up from your environment. So if you strip that back to its sort of its, you know, its basics, then you get to the real person. And obviously, I think people don't realize it. You know, people don't wake up one day and think, oh, you know, I'm going to be a criminal, whether it's a, you know, a proper career criminal or whether it's somebody who just loses it and stabs someone or whatever. People don't wake up one day and think, I'm going to do that. There's obviously a lot of processes that they go through to get there, you know, over a long period of time. And people don't notice. But actually, in a lot of cases, it's building, you know. And obviously, yeah, I definitely think, you know, when you've got like what you're talking about, and they sort of strip some of that away, and strip a lot of the bravado away as well, because obviously that's sort of a barrier to, you know, anything. And I think it's part of our culture, unfortunately, really, you know, with men and just with the way it is. But I think it's changing now, look, you know, but it's got to change more. And yeah, there's some powerful lessons there for people who are involved in crime or not, you know, or even just in life in general. Those are powerful lessons.
Also, you know, I think when you start getting in touch with your thoughts and feelings, you know, you can only. I never cried. I don't think I ever cried. Well, I can't stop crying now. I cried. You know, films. I cried. My dog gets ill. You know, but to get in touch with that side of me was probably one of the best things that ever happened to me, because I was so angry. But the minute I started talking about my thoughts and feelings, and I can remember going behind my door once, you know, and I've been in a therapy group and I listened to a few people, and you know, I'd expressed my a few things about my childhood and everything else. I can remember sitting behind the door and just crying my eyes out, thinking, fucking hell. And you know, it was you know, that for me was the catalyst, because once I opened and started doing that therapy and opened that little valve and started crying and learning empathy and everything else, it was just, I don't know, man. Now I smile. You know, I smile all the time now. I'm always happy. I love animals. I love people. You know, I'm not so bent now. You know, I'm not so bent out of shape. I'm not, you know, my ego's not there no more. You know, I went through a stage where I was in prison, and what I did, I bought 8 or 10 different coloured socks. You know, sorry, someone's just on the phone. You know, I bought all these different coloured socks, and so I would walk around with them because I was so big and I was so aggressive looking. I bought these socks, so when people looked at me, they saw me in pink and orange socks and everything else. They could actually laugh and relate to me instead of me just being really big and confrontational. And I found myself really, you know, operating on a completely different level with them, because simply by the way I just went to the socks. It was crazy, you know. So there's certain things that I did to help myself. Coloured socks. I'd wear shorts.
Someone wants you, Terry. Yeah,
Sorry, mate. One of my pals keeps ringing. But you know, for the last few months, I've been actually going around to schools, because my girlfriend is a school teacher. And what happened all the way through COVID, she went to work every day, and you know, I was really surprised, you know, that, you know, because all the doctors' kids had to go to school still, and all the hospital workers, and they were going to a school across the road from us, and people were dying. Lots of people were dying when COVID first started, and you know, I was really in awe of the work they were doing. So what I did, I wrote a book, a kid's book. It's called The Doodles. And what I've done, I got 2 girls to do the illustrations for me, and now everyone we sell, I donate to schools. So what I do, I go around to hospital wards, and what I do, I donate. I have 4 books to every single school in their library, and up to date, I think we bought 100 books in the last 2 months. And I go to hospital wards, and you know what? Seeing the faces of the teachers and the kids, and when they're reading it, and just see illustrations, because the local girls did it for me. You know, I'm just you know, I get so much satisfaction about just doing these little things now and going around than I ever did with crime. You know, so it's just if we talk about rehabilitation and reformation, and we are more than our past. I really honestly believe that people are not evil. You have people, they learn lessons from their families.
Yeah.
They learn life skills from their families, and they live in situations what set them up to fail. And if you live in poverty and your only way out is to thief, then you would do that, because it's about survival. If you have a really good education, and you have a really positive role models around you, then you will strive to succeed in a different way. But so I can understand both sides of the coin. But I also believe that every guy that I ever met that was really bad, and I met some really bad guys, I know that every single one of them have got the capacity to change. It's just really just giving them the opportunity to do it, and that's what we need: strong leadership and a strong rehabilitation system that will go and work with these people in a way that will bring the best of them. And that's my wish for that for 2022.
Incredible. Well, honestly, mate, and what we've gone into today is blown me away in a really good way, and it will blow away a lot of our viewers and listeners. And I really think it will create some positive change and hopefully spread your message a bit wider and give people some ideas with that. I've gone over time a little bit, so I'll have to shoot off now. I'm sorry, even though I'd love to talk more, but it's absolutely been incredible, and I appreciate you sharing everything that you shared and being such an open book.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. I really appreciate the opportunity coming on. I'm sorry if I go off sometimes on all about prison, but I'm quite passionate about prison and rehabilitation, and we don't really get often an opportunity to actually get that side out there. So I don't know what sort of platform that there is that we can get it out, but yeah, I just really appreciate the fact that you allowed me to come on, and if you ever need a part two.
Thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe to the Simply Inspired YouTube channel, and there'll be more videos coming soon.